Throughout the years, many artists have battled mental health issues and have called upon them for inspiration to create. Many of them have also battled disabilities and done the same. Ian Curtis, the late singer of Joy Division, is an example of one who did both. He suffered from epilepsy, and it teamed up with his already existing depression, and it spurred him to write some of the gloomiest music to ever come out of England. And that's saying something. Before we start talking more about him, let's go over some background info, as well as talk about some other artists that I think are worth discussing. The tortured artist is a trope that many of us have heard before. Someone, be it a painter, musician, or writer, suffering immensely with their inner sorrows and using creativity as their way of venting their pain. This trope dates back to ancient times, with Plato describing creativity as divine madness. Much later on, the Romantic-era poet Lord Byron would say of his fellow poets, "We of the craft are all crazy. Some are affected by gaiety, others by melancholy, but all are more or less touched." Many works of art across different mediums have been inspired by mental health struggles throughout the years. The painting The Scream by Edvard Munch was inspired by an overpowering sense of dread Munch experienced while out walking with friends. As he said, "My friends walked on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature." The novel The Sorrows of Young Werther, written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe in 1774, was famously one of the first popular pieces of literature in which mental health was discussed extensively, namely depression. Goethe was likely inspired by real life, as in the article Depression and Creativity, the case of German poet, scientist, and statesman J.W. van Goethe, published in the Journal of Affective Disorders. Goethe's journal entries and letters were studied and led to the conclusion that he most likely suffered from a form of depression. Those are two big examples, but I could go on forever. Now here's the question. Do mental health struggles help with creative output? As anyone who's been depressed will tell you, depression is tiring. In the words of the great David Lynch, it stands to reason, the more you suffer, the less you want to create. If you're truly depressed, they say you can't even get out of bed, let alone create. It occupies the whole brain, poisons the artist, poisons the environment. Little room for creativity. If I may discuss a personal experience of my own, in February of this year I had the worst depressive episode of my entire life. I won't say what caused it, but it was truly overpowering. I like to think of myself as a very creative person, but during this period, creating things was the absolute last thing on my mind. It wasn't just that I had no desire to create, I found it physically difficult to do anything more than stay idle. I spent pretty much the entire day in bed watching YouTube, and if I moved from lying down to sitting up, then that was a tremendous accomplishment. So yeah, at least for me, severe depression does not help create. It can give you things to base your work on, but as far as your actual ability to create them, well, it just hinders you. Now, mental illness isn't the only way that someone can suffer. The thing about human bodies is that they can hurt like a bitch. And if someone suffers a severe accident or is unlucky enough to develop an incurable illness, the pain and fatigue might not ever go away. This is something that a lot of artists know all too well. The Mexican painter Frida Kahlo suffered grave injuries in a bus crash as a teenager. They never healed properly, and combined with existing spinal problems from childhood polio, left her with lifetime chronic pain. This was made only worse by her coping methods of excessive drinking and smoking, which in turn caused many other health issues. This would inspire many of her paintings because, as she said, "I painted my own reality. The only thing I know is that I paint because I need to, and I paint always whatever passes through my head without any other consideration." An example of this is her 1944 painting, The Broken Column, which shows her body being held upright by a cracked stone column, representative of the back braces she was forced to wear for most of her adult life. Another example is The Wounded Deer, which has her head placed onto the body of a deer with several arrows sticking out of it. I don't think I need to explain much more about the symbolism here. Finally, Tree of Hope portrays two versions of Frida. One is lying in bed with surgical scars on her back, and the other is sitting upright and proud with a flag that, when translated, reads, "Tree of Hope, keep firm," representing her will to keep going. An example in the literary world would be the American artist Flannery O'Connor. Diagnosed with lupus, the disease rendered her unable to get around without crutches and required steroid injections. As a result, she couldn't leave the house by herself. This left her with a great deal of time to work on writing. Not only this, but her works reflected the situation she found herself stuck in. Disabled characters are a recurring sight, and they often touched on themes of human connection, in large part due to O'Connor's desire to connect with other people in spite of her isolated lifestyle. Her stories also had abundant amounts of dark humor and explorations of human mortality. As fellow writer Mary Gordon put it, "I think that it's inevitable that her dark view of the body and not nature, but the bodily world as being only a source of dark things, has to be connected to her lupus. The deformed body, the broken body, the afflicted body is very much a theme that recurs in her work." One of O'Connor's best-known works is the short story, "A Good Man is Hard to Find." I'm going to describe it as best as I can without spoiling it completely. The story is about a family going on vacation. A husband, wife, 3 kids, and a grandmother, who serves as the central character. Before they go, she tries to convince them to pick a different destination for fear of running into a recently escaped serial murderer, but they ignore her. While on this vacation, certain events take place. There are a million different analyses of this story, most of which discuss the supposed religious undertones, which I won't be getting into since that's not really relevant to this video. One thing I do find interesting is that the grandmother character is seemingly dependent on others. When she's unable to convince them to go to a different vacation destination, despite how worried she is, she goes along anyway, instead of just staying home. In the story, this is explained as her being a narcissist who always needs an audience rather than someone too helpless to get by on their own. Regardless, it's noteworthy how Flannery O'Connor, someone whose disability rendered her unable to live independently, wrote her the central character of the story as someone who needed the constant company of others. Now, one thing that has to be acknowledged regarding Flannery O'Connor's lupus is that, well, it killed her. While somewhat treatable now, medical technology in the 50s and 60s lagged pretty far behind, and O'Connor would die at only 39, 12 years after initially being diagnosed. To give you an idea of how grim the prognosis was for lupus sufferers back then, this was 7 years longer than she was initially expected to live. Frida didn't live much longer, dying at 47. The specific cause of her death is still debated. While initially deemed to be a pulmonary embolism stemming from her chronic health issues, an increasingly large number of people suspect it to have been suicide, influenced by the then recent worsening of her health, which required the amputation of her leg. This was the same leg that, due to the aforementioned childhood polio, had circulation issues resulting in gangrene. In effect, her chronic health issues in all likelihood led to her death. When it comes to physically disabled artists, while their condition can give them the inspiration to create, this is countered by the shortened lifespans they're often left with. Now it's time for me to finally talk about the artist whose name I put in this video's title. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to Chris Ott for writing the book about Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures for the 33 1/3 book series. I coincidentally bought it right as I was working on this video script, and it was a massive help for this section. This is the second video in a row where I've talked about Ian Curtis and Joy Division as a whole, and I'm trying to think of any way I can to avoid just repeating myself. There's one thing I can repeat and excuse as being relevant to today's video. Joy Division were great at writing depressing sounding music. It was really what helped them establish post-punk as a separate genre. They took things they were unhappy about and instead of getting angry, they got depressed. In terms of music, the entire band deserves praise, but as a group's sole lyricist, discussing Joy Division's lyrics requires a look into the mind and life of Ian Curtis. Around the time Joy Division's 1979 debut album, Unknown Pleasures, was released, Ian's mind wasn't in terrific shape. He struggled with depression, as indicated by his love of famously cheerful writers such as Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, and Kafka, all of whom have been said to have influenced his writing. His mindset was also influenced by his life at home, namely 2 major decisions he had undergone. He had married his wife Deborah at only 19 and fathered a daughter, Natalie, with her at only 22. Having made such big moves at such a young age would have undoubtedly weighed heavy on his mind, especially with his day job being the notoriously chaotic life of a musician. Lyrically, Unknown Pleasures is generally about feelings of depression. The first lines of the opening track, Disorder, express such. I've been waiting for a guide to come and take me by the hand. Could these sensations make me feel the pleasures of a normal man? Curtis is wondering why he's not able to feel happy the way he sees other people able to do, and he wants someone to help him learn the secret. Candidate has haunting lyrics about losing hope in dreams as you grow older. Guess the dreams always end. They don't rise up, just descend. But I don't care anymore. I've lost the will to want more. I'm not afraid at all. I watch them as they fall, but I remember when we were young. Finally, New Dawn Fades implies something similar. Its lyrics discuss depression and feeling that things aren't going to get better anytime soon. The strain's too much, can't take much more. I've walked on water, run through fire, can't seem to feel it anymore. It was me. Waiting for me, hoping for something more. In between the release of Unknown Pleasures and the follow-up, Closer, 2 major things happened in Ian Curtis's life. The first was that, while on tour in Belgium, Curtis met journalist Annick Honoré and began a relationship with her. While Honoré insists that they were just really close friends, Deborah Curtis and most of those following the band believe that it was an affair, and that seems to be the accepted narrative. There's a terrific WordPress article by Tonino Canucci called The Psychosis of Ian Curtis of Joy Division that said the following about this relationship. A deep thinker often requires other deep thinkers in order to thrive and bounce off. His family did not have this level of thought. Annick, however, was academic, would listen and show more understanding. It is with her that he could escape and talk over ideas with. This left him torn. He was beginning to feel that he had rushed into family life with a woman he was feeling increasingly less and less compatible with, and one who was the mother of his child nonetheless. He had made a decision that he really couldn't undo in starting a family. His solution was seemingly to try and have it both ways, keeping his domestic life but seeking something else on the side. As bandmate Stephen Morris was quoted as saying, "I think he just wanted to change something about his life, but he didn't really know what it was. I know he felt very guilty about it, and we didn't help because we just gave him grief all the time." The second and biggest thing to happen was that Curtis was diagnosed with epilepsy. He was given various medications, but they failed to fully control his seizures. This was only worsened by his lifestyle. Doctors implored him to stop drinking and smoking and to maintain a healthy sleep schedule, but this proved difficult to do while being in a touring band just starting to get famous. The effect this had on his mental health was devastating. His fear of seizures was so immense that he was hesitant to even hold his infant daughter. They would even be triggered on stage, with one in particular happening at a gig in West Hampstead in 1980 that would later be described as his most violent to date. While his band was on the verge of breakthrough, Ian's mind was falling apart. He was wrought with depression over his love life, and his epilepsy was gradually stripping him of the ability to live independently. This would lead him to attempt suicide by means of pills on April 6, 1980, although, worried he hadn't taken a lethal dose and not wanting to be left brain damaged, he told Deborah, who then called him an ambulance. His second attempt on the morning of May 18, 1980, would be successful, however. And no, I'm not going to say he unalived himself. That's stupid, and I don't make any money off these videos anyway. Ian Curtis committed suicide. No other way to put it. 2 months after his death, Closer was released to the public. While Unknown Pleasures was a depressing album, this was far more hopeless in terms of lyrical content. The opening track, Atrocity Exhibition, named after the short story collection by J.G. Ballard, discusses people being drawn to, as you would expect, exhibitions of atrocious, horrible things. The article, Welcome to the Atrocity Exhibition, Ian Curtis, Rock, Death, and Disability, by David Church, written for Disability Studies Quarterly, interprets this as him feeling embarrassed for having suffered seizures on stage in front of fans who only kept cheering. In the appropriately titled Isolation, Ian writes the mournful verse, "Mother, I tried, please believe me. I'm doing the best that I can. I'm ashamed of the things I've been put through. I'm ashamed of the things that I am." The last 2 lines, at least to me, represent the embarrassment of his status as a disabled person, although they could also be referencing the shame of his infidelity. The former stands out to me more, but let me know what you think in the comments. The final verse of 24 Hours is eerily haunting. Now that I've realized it's all gone wrong, gotta find some therapy, this treatment takes too long. Deep in the heart of where sympathy held sway, gotta find my destiny before it's too late. He conveys his disappointment at the ineffectiveness of his epilepsy treatments, as well as his fear that his life is beyond saving. Finally, the closing track, Decades, is one whose lyrics are open to debate. Genius describes it as a song about the trauma that war can have on the young men who fight in it. However, users on songmeanings.com have pointed out parallels between the war analogy and the life of Ian Curtis, him being a young man traumatized by something he couldn't control, similar to the men who were forced to fight in a war they had no role in causing. The album is hard to describe fully without listening to it, and I strongly suggest you do that. I know what a lot of people in the comments are going to say. How can you talk about Ian Curtis's epilepsy and not bring up She's Lost Control? For those of you not well-versed in Joy Division's discography, She's Lost Control is a song on Unknown Pleasures about a woman with epilepsy. I didn't mention it because it was written before he himself was diagnosed, and while it's certainly an eerie premonition that he wrote a song like that, I didn't think it was entirely relevant to discuss. In the year leading up to his death, Curtis's epilepsy wasn't widely known to the public, a luxury that probably would not have existed had they been around today with how fast rumors and secrets can spread on social media. His condition wasn't mentioned by the label in promotional material, and concert reviews of the time don't mention his seizures. One thing I haven't brought up until now is that Ian Curtis's on-stage dancing famously resembled seizures. They weren't, they were apparently just how he liked to dance, according to those close to him, but it's likely that those attending shows he had seizures at just assumed it was part of some elaborate dance routine. There's a brilliant article written by Mitzi Waltz and Martin James for the journal Popular Music, in which the way Joy Division's music has been marketed is discussed. They mention how, for the compilation albums Substance and Heart and Soul, released in 1983 and 1997 respectively, Curtis was portrayed as a tragic figure who expressed the secrets of his mind in his lyrics. The narrative at the time emphasized Curtis's part in a love triangle with Deborah and Anik, while curiously leaving out the role his epilepsy played. It's unclear why they kept his epilepsy mostly hidden from the public, although I personally believe that they simply wanted to respect his privacy, even after his death. This began to change as years went on. One of the first factors was a publishing of Deborah Curtis's book Touching from a Distance, which provided fans with details about Ian's day-to-day life, of which his epilepsy was obviously a huge factor. I will admit that I haven't read the book in full, although I did skim through certain parts. I've read a lot of reviews from people who have bought it, though. One point that I came across was that if you buy this book expecting a book about Joy Division, prepare to be disappointed. This is a book about Ian Curtis, and while Joy Division gets talked about a good deal, it's not the focus of the book. Probably the most well-known piece of Joy Division and Ian Curtis-related media post-breakup is the 2007 movie Control, directed by Anton Corbijn, written as an adaptation of Touching from a Distance. Let me just say that this is a terrific film, and even if you don't know much about Joy Division as a band, I strongly suggest you watch it. If you're already a fan, then this film is as good as it gets. Even outside of the writing, every shot looks amazing, which makes sense since Corbijn was a photographer before he made this film. This movie heavily emphasized Ian's epilepsy and the impact it had on his life. As a result of Touching from a Distance, Control, and the internet making it easier for information to be shared with people, the role Ian's epilepsy played in his art and death is now well known. There's an interesting article written by David Church for Disabilities Studies Quarterly, which discusses the way that Ian's disability is viewed by fans. Church describes how, during the growth of rock as a genre, musicians exploited cultural attitudes that had equated disabled people with freak show attractions, linking the image of a rock musician to that of a freak not being able to fit in. Even when rock was just being born, you had Elvis with his outrageous, for the time, pelvic thrusting dance moves, and Jerry Lee Lewis's wild man persona. This only increased when it came to musicians who died young, since the idea was that they were so unique, they weren't meant to be in this boring world. One big example is Sid Vicious, who embodied punk rock to the fullest possible extent, at the expense of only living 21 years. Hell, the whole idea of the 27 Club plays into this, these musicians who were all so wild that their early death was inevitable. Ian Curtis, being a rock star who died young, but one with an actual disability, therefore meant that images of disabilities were once again exploited among non-disabled crowds, in his case having seizures on stage. The image of Ian Curtis, the tragic figure doomed to a short life, became predominantly what he was known for. I'm aware that by making this video I'm somewhat playing into this, but Ian Curtis was far more than his disability. It's just one part of who he was. To conclude this part of the video, there's a part from the 33 1/3 book that I'm just going to read verbatim since it's too well written to leave out. As with all suicides, it's easy to say the departed gave up or quit. Surely it's fairer in this case to see that Ian Curtis lost. He lost to a disease that no doctor could cure, one that kept him from living the life he had dreamed about. That he considered those dreams more important than the people who loved him betrays his youth and naivety. His epilepsy took a huge physical toll on him, and he felt shame at leading such an indulgent life, while his affair with Anique became less a romance than a monument to his dashed idealism. The poetry that Curtis created from his obstinate observations and idyllic dreams all but validates his convictions, making it hard for those as passionate about music as he was not to deify this confused genius. However casually, critically, or romantically we approach Joy Division's music, we can only mourn the overwhelming, frustrated agony that Ian Curtis could not bear. There have been countless artists throughout history who have struggled with either their mental health or their actual health. Ian Curtis had the misfortune of being both. What gave him inspiration for many of the lyrics he wrote, it also shortened his life considerably. In that shortened lifespan, he still managed to write 2 landmark albums in the post-punk genre. As they say, misery needs company. If you're feeling down, then knowing that other people are feeling similarly can ease the pain somewhat. In the years since the breakup of Joy Division, the number of depressed people who have listened to their music and had it help them during difficult times is certainly very high. The musical output of Ian Curtis might not have been of great quantity, but it's providing reassurance to people up to this very day. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and hit subscribe. I make these videos whenever I can. I always have a ton of fun making them. Hopefully you have as much fun watching them. If you have an idea for a topic you want me to cover, leave it down in the comments. Who knows, maybe I'll get to it. I'm RobbieJ2734. I will see you when I see you next.